Have you ever felt like someone was pulling invisible strings in your mind? That strange moment when you agreed to something without knowing why? What if I told you there are specific psychological triggers that can influence almost anyone? Techniques used by master manipulators, expert negotiators and skilled persuaders every single day? In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to reveal 12 powerful dark psychology hacks that most people have no idea exist. But by the end of this video, you'll never see human interaction the same way again. Stop and think about the last time you walked into a store planning to buy one small item, but walked out with a shopping bag full of things you never intended to purchase. Or that moment you signed up for a subscription you're still paying for months later, wondering why you ever agreed to it in the first place. These aren't accidents or simple lapses in willpower. You were being played. The uncomfortable truth is that skilled manipulators have mastered the art of psychological influence, using techniques so subtle and powerful that they bypass your conscious defenses completely. And the most frightening part? These techniques work whether you believe in them or not. These aren't theoretical concepts or pop psychology. These are battle-tested psychological principles backed by decades of research and refined by everyone from intelligence agencies to billion-dollar marketing firms. They work because they target specific vulnerabilities hardwired into the human brain, vulnerabilities we all share. Think you're immune? That's exactly what makes you the perfect target. Let's expose these hidden tactics one by one. What if I told you that a tiny, seemingly innocent favor could create an almost irresistible urge in someone to return the favor, even if what they give back is worth far more? This is the reciprocity loop, one of the most powerful psychological forces in human interaction. When someone does something for us, no matter how small, we feel an overwhelming compulsion to repay them. This instinct is hardwired into our brains from thousands of years of social evolution. But here's where it gets dark. Skilled manipulators deliberately create these debts. They strategically offer small kindnesses, free samples, or unsolicited help, knowing that each gesture deposits what psychologists call a psychological IOU in your mental bank account. The most insidious part? The return favor often drastically outweighs the original gift. Studies show people will spend up to 700% more than the value of what they received just to discharge this psychological debt. Think about those free samples at the grocery store, or the small favor your colleague did before asking for your help on a time-consuming project. By understanding this hack, you'll notice how often people are trying to create these invisible obligations in your life. Why do we suddenly want something so badly when we're told we can't have it? Why does limited availability make products seem more valuable, even when they are exactly the same as the unlimited version? This is artificial scarcity, a psychological trigger so powerful that it can transform ordinary items into objects of desperate desire. You see it everywhere: limited time offer, only 3 rooms left at this price, 24-hour flash sale. But what's actually happening in your brain? When something becomes scarce, our thinking changes. We focus exclusively on what we might lose, rather than rationally evaluating if we need the item at all. This activates our brain's loss aversion circuits, which neuroscience has shown are far stronger than our reward circuits. But here's the disturbing part. In today's digital world, most scarcity is completely manufactured. There is no actual limit to the number of digital products that can be sold. That countdown timer on the website? It's designed to reset for every visitor. Master manipulators create artificial time pressure and exclusivity, specifically to short-circuit your rational decision-making process. Next time you feel that sudden urgency to buy something because it's almost gone, ask yourself, is this scarcity real, or is someone deliberately triggering your loss aversion? Imagine you need someone to agree to a moderate request. What if I told you that starting with an outrageous request that's certain to be rejected would dramatically increase your chances of getting a yes to your actual request? This is the door-in-the-face technique, and it exploits a fascinating psychological vulnerability in how we process concessions. Here's how it works. When someone makes an extreme request that we refuse and then retreats to a smaller request, we feel social pressure to compromise. Our brain interprets their reduction as a concession, creating a subtle obligation for us to reciprocate. The effect is so powerful that studies show compliance rates increase by up to 40% when using this technique compared to making only the reasonable request directly. You've experienced this when a charity asks for a large donation, then suggests or even just $10 would help. Or when a salesperson shows you an expensive model before revealing the more affordable option. What makes this technique particularly devious is that the initial extreme request serves as a psychological anchor that makes the subsequent request seem reasonable by comparison, even if it's still more than you would have agreed to initially. You'll walk away feeling like you got a deal, completely unaware that the entire interaction was orchestrated. Why can't you put down your phone? Why do some relationships become addictive despite being toxic? What makes gambling so compelling even when people lose money? The answer lies in one of the most powerful psychological forces known to science: intermittent reinforcement. This occurs when rewards are delivered unpredictably. Sometimes you get the reward, sometimes you don't, and you never know when it's coming. Here's what makes it so dangerous. While consistent rewards eventually lose their power, unpredictable rewards create an almost unbreakable attachment. The brain becomes obsessed with predicting when the next reward will come, flooding your system with dopamine not just when you receive the reward, but during the entire anticipation phase. This is why slot machines are designed to provide small, unpredictable wins. It's why social media feeds aren't chronological, but algorithmically designed to deliver high-value content at random intervals. And it's why someone treating you wonderfully one day and terribly the next creates a stronger emotional bond than consistent positive treatment. Master manipulators use this by deliberately alternating between affection and coldness, praise and criticism. Each time they provide the positive reinforcement, your brain gets a stronger dopamine hit than if they were consistently nice, creating a powerful addiction to their approval. What if I told you that getting someone to agree to a small insignificant request dramatically increases the likelihood they'll agree to a much larger request later? This is the foot-in-the-door technique, and it exploits our deep psychological need for consistency. Once we identify ourselves as the kind of person who does something, even something tiny, we feel internal pressure to maintain that identity with similar but larger actions. Making that initial small commitment creates a shift in self-perception. Your brain automatically adjusts your self-image to accommodate this new behavior, making subsequent requests feel like natural extensions rather than new commitments. You've experienced this when a company offers something free but asks for your email, then gradually escalates to paid offerings. Or when someone asks for just 5 minutes of your time before delivering a lengthy sales pitch. What makes this technique particularly effective is that each escalation seems logically connected to the previous commitment. Your brain struggles to find the meaningful difference between what you've already agreed to and what's being asked now. The most dangerous application? Manipulators use this to gradually normalize abusive behavior. By starting with minor transgressions, they systematically desensitize you to increasingly controlling behaviors. Why do we trust someone in a white coat more than the same person in casual clothes? Why does an official-looking email with corporate logos bypass our usual skepticism? This is the artificial authority principle, and it exploits our deep-seated tendency to comply with perceived authority figures. The disturbing truth is that many of the authority signals we respond to are completely manufactured and can be easily faked. The famous Milgram experiments revealed how far ordinary people would go, even administering what they believed were lethal electric shocks, simply because someone in a lab coat told them to continue. But what's truly frightening is how little it takes to create this authority effect. Master manipulators know that we respond to symbols of authority rather than actual legitimate authority itself. A confident tone of voice, specialized jargon, impressive credentials, real or fabricated, formal attire or official-looking documents are often all it takes to trigger our automatic compliance response. In the digital age, this has become even more dangerous. Phishing scams use bank logos and formal language to create artificial authority. Social media experts display vanity credentials to sell dubious advice. The most insidious aspect, we often don't even recognize when we're responding to these authority triggers. Our compliance feels like a rational choice rather than an automatic response to carefully crafted signals. What if someone could shape your entire reality simply by controlling what information you have access to? What decisions would you make differently if you knew what was being deliberately withheld from you? This is controlled information asymmetry, the deliberate creation and exploitation of knowledge gaps between parties. In any interaction, the person who controls the flow of information holds tremendous power. They can present selective facts, withhold crucial context, and frame choices in ways that inevitably lead to their preferred outcome, all while maintaining the illusion that you're making a fully informed decision. You encounter this when a salesperson conveniently forgets to mention the drawbacks of a product, or when someone presents a summarized version of events that omits key details. What makes this technique particularly effective is that humans naturally fill in information gaps with assumptions that skilled manipulators can predict and exploit. By controlling which pieces of information you receive, they can lead you to draw specific conclusions that seem like your own independent thoughts. The most dangerous application? In close relationships, abusers use information asymmetry to isolate victims, controlling which outside perspectives they're exposed to and creating distorted worldviews that normalize the abuse. Why do restaurants seed their tip jars with money? Why do salespeople tell you how many others have purchased a product? Why do influencers buy fake followers? These are all examples of manufactured social proof, the deliberate creation of false consensus to exploit one of our most fundamental psychological shortcuts, looking to others to determine what's correct or appropriate. In uncertain situations, we instinctively look to what others are doing to guide our own behavior. This made perfect evolutionary sense. Following the crowd usually kept us safe. But today, this instinct is systematically exploited through carefully engineered illusions of popularity and consensus. The disturbing reality is that much of the social proof we encounter is completely artificial. Fake reviews, bought followers, paid testimonials, staged photographs of crowds, and inflated download numbers all create the impression that something is more popular or effective than it actually is. What makes this technique so powerful is that it operates below our conscious awareness. We don't decide to be influenced by what others are doing. It happens automatically. And once we believe everyone is doing something, our perception of that thing fundamentally changes. The most insidious modern application? Social media platforms that show you how many likes, shares, or views something has received before you formed your own opinion. What if someone could bypass your logical thinking entirely and make you react based purely on emotion? What decisions might you make that would benefit them but harm you? This is strategic emotional triggering, the deliberate activation of specific emotional states to influence behavior. It's particularly effective because when strong emotions are triggered, they temporarily override our rational decision-making processes. Master manipulators carefully study which emotional triggers are most effective for their targets. For some, it's fear. For others, it's guilt, pride, or the desire for approval. Once identified, these emotional vulnerabilities become powerful levers of influence. You've experienced this when an advertisement makes you feel inadequate and then offers a solution. Or when someone uses guilt to extract compliance. After all I've done for you. What makes this technique particularly dangerous is that when we're in an emotionally triggered state, we rarely recognize that our decision-making has been compromised. Instead, our brain creates logical-sounding justifications for decisions that were actually driven by carefully engineered emotional responses. The most sophisticated application, alternating between triggering negative emotions and offering relief. This creates a powerful dependency where you associate the manipulator with emotional rescue, even though they're the source of the distress. What if someone could make you question your own perception of reality? What if they could convince you that your memories were false, your feelings were invalid, or your observations were mistaken? This is gaslighting, a particularly insidious form of psychological manipulation, where the target is deliberately made to question their own sanity, memory, or perception. Named after the 1944 film Gaslight, this technique is among the most destructive psychological weapons in a manipulator's arsenal. The process typically begins subtly. A manipulator denies something you know to be true, I never said that, minimizes your concerns, you're overreacting, or reframes events in ways that contradict your experience. Over time, these small reality distortions accumulate, gradually eroding your trust in your own perception. What makes gaslighting particularly effective is that humans have naturally imperfect memories. When confronted with someone confidently contradicting our recollection, we tend to question ourselves rather than the other person. You've experienced milder forms of this when someone insists that's not what we agreed to, despite your clear memory to the contrary. In its more extreme forms, gaslighting can lead victims to become completely dependent on the manipulator as the arbiter of what's real. The most dangerous aspect? Unlike many manipulation techniques that target specific decisions, gaslighting attacks your fundamental ability to trust yourself. Why do some restaurants have 25-page menus, while high-end establishments offer only a few carefully curated options? Why do some websites bombard you with options while others limit your choices? This relates to the paradox of choice exploitation, the strategic use of too many or too few options to influence decision-making. It's based on the psychological insight that while we crave choice, too many options actually paralyze us and decrease satisfaction with our decisions. Master manipulators use this knowledge in two powerful ways. First, they can overwhelm you with options, creating decision fatigue that makes you more likely to accept their recommended solution just to escape the mental strain. Alternatively, they can artificially limit options, presenting carefully selected choices that make their preferred options seem like the obvious choice. By controlling which alternatives you consider, they create the illusion of free choice while actually funneling you toward a predetermined outcome. You've experienced this when a salesperson shows you three options: an overpriced one, their target product, and an artificially inferior one. Or when a negotiator presents only options that benefit them. What makes this technique particularly effective is that regardless of which approach is used, you still feel like you've made an independent decision, completely unaware that your choice architecture was carefully engineered. Why do we continue pouring money into bad investments? Why do we stay in unfulfilling relationships or careers? The answer lies in sunk cost exploitation, the deliberate use of our previous investments to manipulate our future decisions. This technique leverages our deep psychological aversion to wasting what we've already invested, whether that's time, money, effort, or emotional energy. Rationally, we should make decisions based solely on future costs and benefits, ignoring what we've already spent, since that can't be recovered. But our brains don't work that way. Instead, we feel compelled to justify past investments by continuing to invest, often throwing good money or time or effort after bad. Master manipulators exploit this by gradually increasing your investment in something before revealing the true costs or disadvantages. By the time these become clear, you've already invested so much that walking away feels like a devastating loss. You've experienced this with subscription services that are easy to sign up for but difficult to cancel, or with products that require additional purchases to be fully functional. What makes this technique particularly effective is that it gets stronger over time. The more you've already invested, the more determined you become to make that investment worth it, even when the rational decision would be to cut your losses. These 12 dark psychology hacks reveal something profound about human nature. Our decisions are far less rational and independent than we like to believe. Our minds are filled with cognitive shortcuts, emotional triggers, and psychological vulnerabilities that can be systematically exploited. But knowledge is protection. By understanding these techniques, you've already taken the first step towards psychological immunity. When you can recognize these tactics being used against you, they lose much of their power. Remember, these techniques work precisely because people don't know they exist. The simple awareness that someone might be using reciprocity, scarcity, or social proof against you creates enough cognitive distance to make a more rational choice. I encourage you to use this knowledge responsibly. The line between influence and manipulation often comes down to intention. Are you using these principles to genuinely help others make better decisions? Or are you using them to override someone's autonomy for your own benefit? If you found this information valuable, subscribe for more psychological insights that can help you navigate an increasingly complex world. Until next time, stay aware and stay empowered.